So we're on, and it looks like it's working, so hopefully we're good. So Bob is not here tonight, and I know that several weeks back the select board had a discussion about priorities and the process. One of the discussions that we didn't have, that the board didn't really come to terms with, is how you want to run the budget discussions. So historically, there would be one previous select board members that took charge of running the discussions and just going through, making sure that each individual person, you know, had their number, if it was a change up or down, that there were enough people to account for that change, and everybody agreed upon that. And so I know that Bob did make it clear to me that he was not interested in running the budget discussions. We do have 2 new board members that have never been through this process, so I would suggest that neither of you take on the challenge of doing that. And so the other 2 board members, if there's an interest with you, if not, then, I mean, I'm happy to kind of just go through department by department, and you could take turns and go through and ask questions. I guess the first thing is, do you want to go line by line, or do you want to go one by one and ask questions about individual sections in the department to get a general idea of how you want to stagger this conversation? To get an idea of how you want this process to move along. So it is more or less a workshop, so there's not going to be any motions or decision making about you know, what has to happen right now, but this is the process to guide through onto the next step of the budget and the next draft and so forth. So with this being the first draft, I did tell you that I was going to beef up a lot of the numbers just to kind of start at the high end and work our way down. There is still a lot of information that will need to be adjusted in the next weeks to a month and a half, meeting with department heads and certain numbers that we're still waiting for deciding relative to paving. We have a new gentleman that I'm trying to connect with to give us some quotes about what it would cost to do some of the paving that we've put off for a couple of years. So things like that, that will be incorporated one way or another. But for now, this is rough draft number 1, and you know, if you want to kind of talk amongst yourselves to figure out how you want to proceed, we can get started.
I'm happy to do it. I think if you think you can do it more efficiently, do it. I mean, I don't think it matters so much who does it, who's in charge of running the show. So I would look to you. I'd rather have a board member do it out there if you feel like it's better. You do it, you do it. I think, particularly on the departmental budget, it's kind of you have a lot of knowledge and it's helpful, you know. But if we get to some of the other things like capital and the nonprofits and all that, I do think the board kind of needs to be in the driver's seat there because it's a board thing. So it's up to you.
I mean, I think if we want to start with going department by department and taking one person at a time and asking questions or clarifying information or things like that.
It might be helpful given people's introduction to the budget and a member of the finance committee here and then an experience, you know, so 2 people from the finance committee, that's right. So I wonder if you could go through department by department and sort of highlight kind of, you know, where we're at and then what are the changes you're seeing, and not necessarily so much monetarily, but kind of, you know, for example, say the transfer station, you know, maybe we have to replace a compactor or something. So just kind of a high-level discussion of each department before we even get into the numbers, so we understand. And even like for everybody's benefit, believe it or not, just like, how many employees do we have in that department, full-time, part-time, and, you know, that kind of thing. Just sort of like a couple minutes on each department, so we're all on the same page, because I know it's sort of embedded in your brain, but we don't always know. And if someone asked me to name all the employees right now, I don't know if I can do it, so. That would help me before we even get into the numbers. And personally, I'm not a line-by-line kind of person. I would then look to you to point out the major changes or, you know, the major ups or downs that you think we should be aware of. Does that work?
Yeah, I'd like to be introduced to each department.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll start with, does anybody have any questions in the public? Or suggestions?
All right.
One small one. I think we'll probably do the, but if you could just say what the budget is for last budget and what you're proposing this year and what the increase is based on. With the suggestions.
All right, well, we'll start with 1,300. It's the admin and the select board budget. So this is the budget where the employees that are physically working in the town office, there's 4 of us in the office that are there. And this includes the day-to-day functions of the office and the technology around it, the select board, publications, office supplies, select board meetings, building maintenance around the town, office side of things. Contracted services are going to include things like working with JP Cog. We have a contract through them. We have, you know, rental of the printer machine, things like that. So training. So for this particular department, we have had in the last year 2 new employees that have started, and we've had a complete shift in one of the job descriptions. So the bookkeeper description over the last couple of years has kind of gone up and down from part-time to full-time to part-time to split between the school to not split between the school. And so now we have, since the fall, we have had a pretty core group of employees that are working out really well. We have a really fantastic bookkeeper that has picked up things really well, loves Excel spreadsheets, which is wonderful because I despise them. That particular department is working really well together. And so there is, if you look at the total department, it does show that there is a 4.3% increase. So you're going from $337,000 to $351,000. The largest increase you're going to see is you're going to see a large shift in part-time and full-time wages, and that's we're just redirecting the job because the full-time was bookkeeper and now it's primarily a part-time position. We have had to, with every time we hire an employee, those salaries are hired at a fairly more significant rate than they have in the past or to past employees. And so there is the increase with that. Membership dues and training are going to be the 2 departments where you're seeing a larger increase. The reason behind that is to invest more into the employees to have better training. With the membership dues, I am looking to do a membership through ICMA, which that is, it is a International Management Association something, but it's it has a lot of great resources for training, and so I would like to utilize and have the staff do some training through those programs. Each of those classes, if you go to Maine Municipal, they're $35 to $100 per class. These classes can average anywhere between $100 to $400 or more. So there are some really good budgeting classes that I would like to take that I know the bookkeeper is interested. So that's really the reason behind the increases for those two departments, is to allow us the funds to do that and be able to have access to those.
We've spoken about supporting you and going to the Maine Municipal Annual Conference. Is that included in this as well?
So that is included in the training line item. I did allocate funds to be able to attend the Maine managers
Very good.
meeting.
Okay. I'm glad.
Any specific questions? So the one thing is all of the town employees, and I usually put it in the notes, and I'm just noticing that I didn't put in, the last several years, there have been COLA increases, so from one fiscal year to the next.
Okay.
The COLA increases,
Speaking, does everybody know what COLA is?
cost of living adjustment.
Yeah, thanks.
So the COLA increase number for this year is, that I'm recommending, is 3%. The select board could choose to support that or not support that. In the past couple of years, there's been a year where the board supported the percentage that I recommended. One year they suggested 1% lower. The number that is selected is, I'm a part of a Southern Maine Managers group where we meet on a monthly basis on Tuesdays for an hour, and it's just a Zoom discussion to talk about what's going on and what are relative things or not. And then JP Cog, Greater Portland Government of Commerce, collects through the Southern Maine region, what the COLA recommendations are. And so what I typically do is I take the average and then go a little bit below. And so most people are recommending between 3% and 5%. And so I stuck with the 3%, which was the number from last year for the COLA recommendation. And that you will see across the board between town, solid waste, public works, and all the town employees that qualify for benefits.
So that's incorporated in the numbers this year.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'll add, usually I put the notes in, and I'm not sure whether I shut that section off or not, but I'm not seeing that the note is in there, so I'll make sure that's in the next budget.
So we have a couple questions. Liza?
Thank you. Line 1,000, the
Yes.
wages, we call it line 1,000. Why are the wages lower for the 2026 initial?
Because last year, the full-time bookkeeper position was in that wage. And so if you see 1,000 is full-time wages, 1010 is part-time wages.
Yeah,
Last year's, the part-time wage budget was only $3,100 because we were only budgeting in that line item for cleaning services. This year, that budget line is significantly increased because the bookkeeper salary has gone in there, which is a part-time position, which I'm hoping someday maybe could be a full-time position again, but for right now, who we have and the capabilities that are able to provide, we're getting more than enough for the services, so it works.
and how many hours a week is that?
So we are averaging 30 hours a week,
Okay.
but it's really fluctuating around the employee's education schedule.
Right.
So right now, the employee is able to give me 37 hours. A month or two ago, it was 27 hours.
Okay.
So we have, the average is 30 hours.
You'll see that. Thank you.
But overall, the wages budget is 233,025, 252,000 2026, right? So overall, the wage inflation is actually increased.
The over, yes, it has, because we have hired two, last time this year, an employee was hired with a higher wage than the employee that was replaced, with an understanding that there was gonna be a bump. And then same thing with the position that was hired within the last couple of months, and so
Okay.
those increases, and then in addition to the COLA increases, have impacted the overall increase. I'm also allocating more for janitorial salary, with the anticipation that there might be a change in how and who does that between now and the end of fiscal year 26.
And so there's no offset then? Those are new additions to the budget?
No, that's just, that is an allocation for why those two line items have the increase that they do. And so I do have a spreadsheet where it lists the employees and the numbers. I just don't like to share that publicly because it has the people's name on it, and I don't, well, it's all public knowledge. I don't want to blast it out there with people's first and last names, but if you want to see the direct breakdown, by all means, I'm happy to put that in the.
We have done that in some
Yep.
cases, so I think that's not something we need now, but, I think we can look at that, but it's not reflected, it's really incorporating some changes we made in this fiscal year, really.
Yes,
It's basically capturing those costs that we know we're gonna have in 2020.
correct.
Are there any more questions on the administrative budget?
No.
No.
And the Board of Selectmen's budget? Okay, so the next one. And some of these we can zip through because they're pretty simple.
Yep. Any questions from the public about that?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Does the bookkeeper do anything for the school?
The bookkeeper does, the payroll does, the warrants, paying bills and things like that, and
But
so,
all the money's in this account?
correct.
Okay.
And so,
That
several
was my
years.
question. I didn't see it under the school.
Yeah, several years ago, it was split, then it wasn't, and then it was, and then the board a couple of years ago made the decision to just keep it all.
But we're a municipal school department. so
Correct.
Our finances go through this.
Yes,
They don't do it.
yeah, so the whole salary is under that.
But we used to split the bookkeeper cost for some reason.
Yeah.
Between the two entities, and it's sort of crazy. Because it's all, all right. Any more questions on, okay, move on to assessment.
The next one is the assessor, and there is really, the one change that is going to be anticipated, which I have had conversation with the current assessors about this. I had reached out to them about getting more concrete numbers. I have not heard back from them. They do come once a month, but it is a new, it is a couple that is working to do the assessment services. I anticipate through the conversations that they will stick with us through fiscal year 26, but it was clearly made that they would do the current year for the salary that was already appropriated, but they would expect a change. I don't know what that change is. I honestly just added a number in here just to show that there is an increase, to make you be alert and aware of it, with the note that expect an increase. I don't know what that increase is. Do I think that it's gonna go from $12,000 to $48,000? No, but I do suspect there is gonna be a couple $1,000 jump. And once I have that information, I'll put it in.
So any questions from the board about Department 1400, the assessment?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Am I correct that there was, no, it's code enforcement that's doing the Hope Island, right? Who are the two guys that are going out?
That's code enforcement.
Code enforcement,
But actually, the owner, the property owner pays for that.
And they
Correct.
pay for that, right?
Correct.
Okay, so none of that is in here. Okay,
Correct.
thanks, good.
Okay, any questions from the public on assessment?
Yeah, at some point in time, will there be a need to do a town-wide reassessment? And is that anywhere reserved or in the budget?
so that is in the reserve accounts, and, it
We'll get there.
is, it's a 90-40 revaluation, there is, $78,000 in there. And so a number of years ago, we were, quoted at about $75,000 for a reevaluation. The current assessors are interested in doing the reevaluation. The number that they know we have, they felt like it would be more than enough to do that,
Great.
but they also weren't gonna jump into it within their first year, so.
Okay, so if there's no other questions on the assessor department, we'll move on to 1650 elections and registrations.
Elections, so this is, the election workers that we have. You will see that, the budget is up by 200%. The reason is they've been getting paid $14 an hour the last several years, and with the minimum wage, well, yes, it's not at $20 an hour. I bumped up it to $20 an hour to pay the people that sit here for 8 to 14 hours, taking in the registrations. I think that as we're going through and everyone's salaries are increasing, it was only fair to provide a little bit more than what we've been given to the few people that, you know, quote unquote volunteer their time to sit here for 10 hours a day.
Any questions from the board on that department? Any questions from the public? And I think that's sort of the general endorsement of that approach.
Yeah.
Next department, 1700 planning, Gail Bush.
The only change in this particular budget is, as you can see, the GIS, the cost of that has gone up a little bit over the last couple of years. And so that's just allocating what the actual costs are of that.
What exactly are we doing with GIS in this year coming up?
So so USHED, which is Fulton George, is our GIS contractor. And the $700 is the subscription fee for the software. And just to put it in perspective, the regular, the subscription fee for the full-blown thing is like $5,000. So this is a special kind of, she basically maintains the site and updates the parcel maps and helps us with various GIS stuff. But that number, the 700, is really just.
It's the annual subscription to the service.
And
That's correct.
under the $3,000 would be if she, if she does something from the planning board or somebody else in the town, or she actually made this year, with all, Julia had worked on a bunch of things on the marine stuff, so she helped with that one. So she's very reasonable in terms of her charges. So that's, and the consultant can also be for the planning board if they have something they need. So all in all, that's what that's. And I think though, based on my experience, those, even though they haven't spent anything this year, I think it's good to have the money in there. Might need it.
A few years back, there was more money in that particular account, and the select board at the time took some of that money and reallocated into legal services. So then that way there was redistribution of the funds.
So any questions about the planning budget on the board? How about the public? So from there, we'll move on to 1900 legal services, as was mentioned.
So legal services, a couple of years ago, it went up due to all of the legal fees that we were accruing. And at this point, I'm just leaving the line item as it is. I don't see a dire need to increase it, and definitely not decrease it, just for this benefit that we are still going through legal issues that we don't know at what point it could pick up and cost more money.
You can refresh my memory, but back a few years ago, we exhausted the legal budget and had to take money out of contingency.
That is correct. Yeah.
So we don't, that's not a great place to be.
Is that reflected here?
Well, no, I mean, you can't really see it, but we actually spent more than, so we expended that budget and then we had to allocate money from the contingency, which is for things like that.
So when the town votes on, let's say you'll bring the town warrant to the town, they will vote for this particular department, 1900 legal services, it will be $23,000. In fiscal year 26, the town cannot exceed more than 10% of that. And if they do, they have to go to town meeting and they have to ask the taxpayers to offset that cost. So the 2023 budget was the year that the town exceeded. There used to be only like 10,000 or very minimal amount, and it exceeded it, and it was gonna exceed the 10%. And so we put into the actual budget what we legally could, and then when the money was allocated through town meeting, that's the pool of cash was used to pay the rest of the bills.
And our goal is not to do that, we don't have to.
Correct, because it does not look responsible.
Well, and it takes
To
time
taxpayers.
and effort, and it slows down, it can slow us down if we don't have enough money in the bank to do what we need to, so to speak.
And,
So, any questions?
and this is for all legal fees?
Correct.
Right, so we've consolidated them all.
With the
into one.
exception of the school department does have their own line item for legal fees.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, historically, legal fees are probably the most difficult to predict, given
I think so.
the
Except now we know they're not low.
yeah, that's right. Right.
Any more questions from the board? How about the public?
So just so I understand the process, Carol, so the 2024 was the budget was 19,787, but then there was other monies allocated to it, to legal fees.
2023, so in 2023, the town exceeded more than they were able to.
Oh, 2023.
And in 2024 town meeting, they asked for more money to offset the cost in 2023. The 2024, what was expended is the accurate number that was expended, and that was when the town was going through mediation and really had a lot of expenses specific to one particular case, which has really slowed down this year, but at some point there will be a level of increase, hopefully, to wrap things up eventually.
And Vika, maybe it would be good to, at this point, explain what happens if we don't expend all the funds in a certain part.
So at the end of the fiscal year, when specific departments don't expend all of the money, so you look at, fiscal year 25 right now, $5,500 has been expended. The difference of that money would go into the undesignated funds, and that's how the undesignated fund kind of gets built up.
And it's sort of, I think of it sort of like, it goes into the savings account.
Yeah.
It's not like it doesn't evaporate, it's
Right.
actually money that's been allocated by the town meeting. So we put it sort of back in the bank, and sometimes we draw on that to cut down on the tax impact of the overall budget.
So what is the difference between having it in a savings account and having a contingency fund?
So the town, it's really what and which departments you're specifically allocated the funds to. The undesignated fund balance is where the leftover pool of cash at the end of the year goes into.
Right.
The town has a policy where it is suggested to keep a certain amount of money, so there is the money to be able to access. And what the board has done historically is to minimize the blow to the taxpayers and to not see the increase. If you look historically, the taxes have increased. I think the town's budget has nearly more than doubled from the time they became a town to now, but the boards have done a really good job to using $100,000, couple $100,000 from undesignated fund balance and to putting it into the overall budget, so then it offsets the increase from this year to that year. With the reserve accounts, you're specifically allocating the funds for that specific project, and it cannot be used for anything other than that specific project. And so every year, the town will vote on a list of reserve accounts and specific language as what that reserve account is to spend money for, and then that money can only be used for that. If the town wants to use it, or select board has a recommendation to use it for something else, they have to go to the taxpayers and in town meeting ask to reallocate those funds.
And the contingency fund,
I'm sorry?
and then Liza Jane had a question about the contingency fund.
I guess what's your questions in terms of?
So that's an annual allocation, sort of the contingency that we have, it's sort of the, select board contingency fund.
So the select board contingency is like with any other department on an annual basis, the select board makes a recommendation, and that's for unexpected expenses. So if I come to you right now and, say that, the technology system blew up, we don't have a line item to cover it, we need $10,000. That's kind of the unexpected.
But if, let's just say we suddenly had a big bill for legal fees, the money couldn't come out of, that exceeded the 10%, the money couldn't come out of the contingency fund.
It could, and that's what happened a couple of years ago. The select board used all their legal fees, used all their contingency, and then had to go to the taxpayers and ask for more money to cover the legal fees. So after that, what the board did is it more than doubled its legal fees. It really bumped up its contingency. So then there was that cushion. And then when that money doesn't get used, it just goes into the undesignated fund.
And what's the balance of approximately, of our undesignated fund balance savings?
So at the end of last year, the undesignated fund balance was in the $600,000 range.
Okay.
Money was pulled from that to offset the current year's budget. And so in the audit process, while the auditors are kind of figuring out, and this is something that I could take the estimated numbers right now and predict that, but with how fluid the budget still is and with my experience, I don't feel comfortable giving you that recommendation, and that's just my honesty. And so waiting for that number from the auditors, we will have that towards the end of the budget. So you will have a general idea of what comfort level you might have and how much funds you might want to use to offset the fiscal year 26 budget with the undesignated fund.
Good, thank you.
So, any questions? I think we sort of covered everything. Public okay on that? Yeah, all right. So now we're going to move on to Department 2100, law enforcement services.
So with the law enforcement, you are going to see a large jump in part-time wages and gasoline. And so there's been a lot of talk about adjusting the parking attendant position. And Also with the changes that keep getting made and the improvements that are being made to the traffic and parking ordinance, more areas that need to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Enforced, thank you, is increasing the time that needs to be allocated for that position. So the position historically had been at 1 hour a day, and the parking attendant was responsible to driving from the Stone Wharf to Chandler's. There was money for fuel reimbursement for that. Due to some personnel situations over the years, fuel reimbursement was not provided due to some personnel issues. And so going into the next, we have somebody that's doing it not on a permanent basis. And so going into fiscal year 26, what I have done is I have bumped up that position, the salary, the hourly rate of it from $19 to $25 to make it more appealing to hopefully whoever takes that job in the future, and then increased it to 1.5 hours a day, because I went for a drive to do those one day, and it is more time consuming with the added areas. And so if the board is going to be discussing having Jenks Road and the Hook and Bennett's Cove and the Stone Pier, there needs to be the allocation for that time. Also, doing the loop in, personal vehicles are used to do this. And so if it's not a town vehicle being used, it's a personal vehicle, it is in town policy to reimburse the employees for that. And so that's the increase in the law enforcement. I have not received, the contracted services is, sheriff contract is under there. I have not received the anticipated contract cost for the next year. The current year that we in, they did go down a couple $1,000s. I would assume that it's gonna stay relatively the same because there aren't any anticipated personnel changes for that position for the coming year. So the primary and really the only increase is with the anticipation of the changes that have taken place and will probably continue to take place relative to the parking enforcement position.
Okay.
Any questions from the board on the law enforcement services? I have one question, as I assume along with more enforcement, maybe it's generating more revenue.
It's generating a lot of revenue.
So we have a sense, is it compensating for the increase?
I don't have those numbers. I'm happy to draft them up and to make that comparison, just to see what we've received in revenue in the last couple of months. I do know that, and I know because I was asked to deliver it, we gave a whole book of tickets to one car.
Yeah.
So, and that was, one car received over $2,000 in tickets because the ordinance was changed that after 48 hours, it goes up to $50. And, there are still some people that aren't abiding by it. And to my knowledge, the vehicles are being ticketed, and based on the flow of tickets that we're receiving, it has significantly jumped. And so I would, at least for now, I would suspect that, yeah, there's definitely a significant offset with what we're collecting.
How effective would you say is the collection of those
Very
fines?
effective.
They're-
We only have a couple of people that historically had not paid for them. We send them to collections and then we get it from collections. And we don't receive the full amount from collections, but beauty of that is then it's out of our hands and it's impacting their credit score by not paying those bills. One particular vehicle that we had that sat there for a very long time, we did send them a letter, and that's typically the process the deputy clerk will do when there is a certain amount of X amount of dollars. It's maybe $500 or something like that. We let them know that they're gonna go to collections. And so we did that, gave them a due date of if we don't have a payment by this day, it's going to collection. And we had a payment, and now we have another bill out for, for the same situation. For the most part, people pay. There are a couple of vendors that don't, but I think we're now collecting far more than we were before and making far more money from it.
Any more board questions? Public? Mark?
I think it's working better because I'm taking a lot of complaints from people. So, that's a good thing.
That's good.
So, may I ask, is the goal of increasing the parking attendant amount for the part-time position to expand the job duties of that part-time position?
So the job duties inevitably have been getting expanded with the different changes that have been made to the parking and the traffic ordinance, and adding some suggestions to now needing to drive by the hook and areas like that. And so I had done a drive for all of the areas that are currently in the ordinance. And then there are discussions, around Jenks Road and what will take place. And so to really anticipate the possible changes and to make sure that we are covered, I increased that to the daily rate to an hour and a half versus an hour, because it was exceeding the hour. And so just to be safe, I bumped it up to an hour and a half a day.
And you also bumped up to $25,000 an hour. And then my last question is, how are we handling the gasoline reimbursement, realizing that the IRS thing probably doesn't work on here? How are we handling that amount?
So, I guess clarify when you say the IRS thing doesn't work.
Well, isn't the IRS reimbursement about 60 cents per mile?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would work on here.
So what had been done historically when Marjorie was working, how it was done, and looking at the policy for reimbursement, and I'm happy to double check legally, but if they're using a personal vehicle, you do use the IRS reimbursement rate. And so that's what I did, is I drove from Stone Wharf to each location and back and took the miles and multiplied that by, 65, 66 cents. And then multiplied that by how many days in each month. And then that's collectively how that number came up. So then there was that, those funds allocated in the case of reimbursement.
Yeah. The reason I asked is you're bumping it from 1,400 up to 4,000. That's why I asked that.
Well, so the gasoline is also fuel for the sheriff.
Yeah.
So when the sheriff's here, we're averaging almost $100 a week in fuel for him.
Okay.
And so the last couple of years, the reimbursement for the parking attendant has not been included in it.
Thank you.
And there are reasons for that.
So, any more questions on law enforcement? And so, we don't know the actual number for the sheriff's cost, but we're not expecting a huge difference. So, next one is chapter 2200, fire and rescue.
And I just did realize that I have not been doing Mark's suggestion of where the number is this year and what the suggested number is.
It was only a
in the increase,
suggestion.
so. So the fire department, so I'll try it, fire and rescue 2,200, fiscal year 25, budget was, I'm looking at code enforcement officer, 153, and 26 is 156, 2.44%. I anticipate that this particular department there will be recommendations from the fire department for increases. I will be meeting with all of the department heads in the coming weeks, scheduling those meetings into late January, and have a better idea. They're a department that I typically sit down with the fire chief and the administrative assistant, and we go through line by line and go through and discuss what did work, what didn't work, and what changes need to be made. The wages are the wages that get paid to the volunteers who, and when they are on call, the fire department keeps track of that, and on a quarterly basis, they give us those numbers. The stipends are the number that the fire department, they have a system now that took a few years for them to develop, where based on training and hierarchy, they get a certain dollar amount for a stipend, and that stipend is paid out right before Christmas. This particular year, the fire department did apply for a grant, and they received a $15,000 grant, and so the fiscal year 25 stipend line item will be adjusted to show that difference. So it will show that there was less spent than it really was because they received a grant to offset that cost. A lot of the areas for this particular department, this department is all relative to fire and rescue, and recently equipment maintenance and building maintenance have been the areas where we have increased more increases. In this particular year, we have seen that those specific line items have gone over budget, and there have been some unexpected breaks to vehicles or parts of the building that had to be fixed. And then there is also, in the brief conversation I did have with the fire chief, there are going to be some anticipated changes that they're going to have to make in the coming year. And so there have been some things that I've put in here just in terms of like, for example, with the equipment maintenance, looking at just putting kind of what the average has been generally over the last couple of years, but I do know that that line item is going to be recommended by the fire department to increase. When I have a better idea of what that recommendation is from that department, we'll put that in. Their contracted services line item is an increase, and that, once again, it's just because historically over the last couple of years that line item has been going over, and so that's just a general. The one increase in here is the apparel. It has been stated to me that the fire department is in the position where they need to switch out some of their gear, so they're going to be suggesting some increases. Last year, they did receive a grant to cover the cost. I know that this year they did miss the window and did not apply for that grant, and I put that in with the assumption that that is going to be an asked line item to be increased. But obviously, it's up to the board to, in your discretion, to determine whether you support those increases or decreases or not.
And, you know, we typically, we kind of have a report from the fire chief.
Yeah, so we have the department, the board will have, and I don't have a schedule on me, but budget discussion, hold on, I will, if I can, So department discussion is gonna take place on February 8th, is a Saturday. And so at that particular meeting, administrative, public works, solid waste, transfer station, what I've done the last couple of years is I've done a memo for each department after, well, fire department was the only one that I had historically really sat down with and had these discussions. Now I have more personnel that are more involved with that, so I'll be sitting down with more people, but you will get a memo with really more description on specific line items, why they did or didn't go up, and why the entire budget did or didn't go up for that department. What are some recommendations from the department, what is recommended for investments, what's not, and things like that. So that particular budget discussion, you will have more thorough information, which I think will be more and closer relative to kind of what some of the finalized recommended numbers that I will be providing you for the department budgets.
So any questions from the board on fire and rescue? How about the public? John?
So on the grants, there's now the fire department has a 501c3. And they might apply for a grant through using their town identity versus a grant through the 501c3.
So the $15,000 grant that they applied for to offset the cost for the stipends was through the town tax ID. I know that since they've developed the nonprofit, it has been in the interest of the select board to have a report on that. I don't believe that the board has gotten to the point where they've been able to receive that information, so I can't really speak to the details or how that nonprofit operates or what they apply for.
Yeah, I was just curious as to how that works to offset costs that are in the budget, or their last appeal, I think, said that to outfit a firefighter, apparel was $4,000. And here's the new firefighters, and there were a bunch of them. So that was a big expense. And that's not any, the apparel line is very low versus that potential expense.
Well, I don't know if we know exactly what they're proposing yet for this year.
Correct.
And I think, some of these grant programs, it has to be a municipality that applies for the grants. They probably also have access to grants as the nonprofit. But I would say they've done generally a pretty good job of trying to access funds that are.
I know that they've been upgrading one apparel a year is how they've been trying to do it, and or if they've had somebody new, like the grant that they applied for last year, there was a new firefighter that joined, and that grant covered the cost. It was a reimbursement grant, but it covered the cost to, dress that firefighter. And then now they've had a number of them join this year. I did put in the budget with the anticipation of what I know as the cost of that one, but I have not had that sit-down discussion with them, and that's why that number is minimal in there, because I put in the cost of what I know the average cost of that one was from last year. And I don't, maybe they will ask the taxpayers to cover one or two, and then maybe they'll use the nonprofit. I'm not sure, but that's the discussions that I will have with all the departments towards the end of January, in time for that February discussion, is when we'll be able to have more of those answers about what they're looking to cover by the taxpayers versus what they'll have covered by the nonprofit.
Thank you.
I can answer some of that. With the appeal letter, it was the goal of the appeal letter was to cover the head to toe outfits for the 6 newly certified firefighters. And then the chief also needs some equipment to be replaced as well. And if you're in there looking at the old equipment that's been around for a long time, there's a lot more than 6 new sets that really are needed. So, but the goal for the fundraiser was to cover enough for those 6 new firefighters who put in about 200 hours each to get that certification.
Yeah,
And that's
I want to keep our volunteer firefighters happy
Yeah, and safe.
properly equipped.
The lining of the older equipment is filled with PFAS. So I think it's in the safety of our people on the front line, getting that replaced is a priority. So we'll see how things go with the fundraising and take it from there.
Okay. And Mark, do you have a question?
No, he stole my question again.
All right, so we can move on from fire rescue, if everybody's all good, on 2400 code enforcement.
Code enforcement, so 2025 is 5775 and 2026 initial is 67,550. The major jump that you are going to see in here is for the part-time wages. Last year, the select board, so the code enforcement officer went through a shift of employees, and within that, there was also a big shift in increasing the hours that are being allocated to the position. The number that was put in into last year's budget was, I believe, more or less an estimate about the average hours and costs. The current code enforcement officer was hired with an average of 23 hours at $50 an hour. And so we are taking the current average that we have, and we are anticipating what realistically that increased around what the current position is going to be for fiscal year 26. Which it is a big jump, but I don't think it's a surprise to a lot of people, especially if they're aware of the major change that the code enforcement officer position has taken in the last year.
And I would add the request of the members of the community. We definitely had a lot of community input that we went through the code enforcement. So any questions from the board on the code enforcement budget? Public? Mark?
How many hours a week is the code enforcement officer expected to put in for the tenant?
22.
And is that currently
Between
being,
18 and a half and 23 hours is the expectation, averaging about 23.
And is
Some
that-
weeks going over.
is that currently being done in our opinion, in your opinion?
Yes.
Okay.
This time of year, we're looking at payroll numbers being in the high 18, 19, about between 18 and 21. During the summertime, the number is more significant. There has been hours where he was, nearly 30 hours.
And how many days a week would the individual be expected to actually physically be available to citizens or contractors on the island?
He is pretty regularly, he's right now on a 2-week vacation, so he's not around right now, but he is pretty regularly on the island every single Wednesday from the 8 to the 3:45.
Okay. And so that's roughly a 9-hour day.
And then what he does is he designates, so Tuesdays and Wednesdays are really his shebig time, but he tends to open himself up to people on other times as well. And so those are the days that we recommend to people that they reach out to him, but people do email him other times, and I think we're through the shift in the position, we're still in somewhat of a transition mode adjusting to how the in-person versus the not in-person position looks like, and the, to what level of responsiveness is appropriate, and
Gotcha. I'll be careful with my comments, and I don't want these comments to be taken out of context. And I realize that years ago, we likely did not have adequate code enforcement activity and coverage. So recognizing that, I just want to say, we have gone from $28,000 a year and $41,000 a year for wages for this position as of 2024, $50,000 a year in the current budget to almost $60,000 a year. My point being, I realize that revenues can offset positions, so I would hope that you at least consider return for cost in any position that you fund for this community and taxpayers. In other words, is the individual available and responsive? Is it doing what you're expecting it to do for the entire community, not just a few contractors? No offense to the contractors, but I know how they can act. And is it comparable to other communities of our size within reason? Thank you.
Yeah, are we able to raise permit fees, those type of things to offset?
permit fees have been raised in the last couple of years, and we have, over the last couple of years, which also I think has an impact to the level of the construction has taken place.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it, but I feel like last year we were in like the $35,000, nearly $40,000 range in revenue collecting for permit-related fees.
How much was that, I'm sorry?
35 to 40,000.
Okay, so it's covering some good chunk of this.
I mean, ideally, I think with some positions similar to this one, it is, you know, a good practice to try to be able to have revenue offsetting it. I think having said that, we've definitely experienced a large shift in all jobs across the board within the municipality, and there was a very loud and heard response from many people about increasing this position, and so with the increased position, there are some definitely learning curves and trying to figure out how to be, you know, accommodating and adaptable to everybody, not just a specific group of people.
Thank you. I've wondered why if he's being paid for 2 days, why is he not available here on the island?
That was under the conditions that he was hired, so that was
And does that,
negotiations.
is that an impediment to the public's access for code enforcement? Is that working
So
okay?
part-time code enforcement officers are very difficult to find. They make very good money doing this full-time in larger municipalities. And so I think the town experienced firsthand disadvantage of that, and then having to go and hire somebody, having to pay them more, and having to really negotiate a contract that could work for both parties.
I hear you. Thank you.
I just want to say that that's in recognition of the work that he does, the two of them actually, at home, dealing with people and setting up daily tasks.
And if I understand what you said, they could at least make themselves available outside of themselves.
Yes.
And I guess just where the board was, I think Mark was on the board still, part of my thinking anyway, were involved in multiple land use lawsuits that were costing the town significant money and might still have some significant costs. So that to me was also, and some of that was related to maybe not having so coverage, you know, implementation, whatever. So that was kind of part of our incentive was to get that up and running. I think this is not a permanent, this particular individual, I don't think it's a long-term solution, so I think we are gonna have to evaluate kind of what we need going forward, but I do think, you know, in the next couple of years, and we could adjust if that's what we want to do. But we also experienced what it's like not to have a code enforcement officer at all, it's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it's a problem everywhere, I will say, you know, code enforcement is, I kind of think there should be a different system. Small towns trying to get code enforcement.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Shabib did have a discussion, probably at this point, 2 years ago, with Long Island to see how maybe, in long term, it could potentially work sharing some services. And so, I think both communities went through some changes, probably Shabib more so than Long. But I think that is still an opportunity and a discussion worth having with Long Island to see if some services such as this one could be shared in the future. I do know they are looking for a code enforcement officer right now, and they did reach out to see if I'd be willing to share ours, and I said no.
Thank you.
Mark?
I'll be very quick. Code enforcement officer, he or she, they also have to be certified in a lot of areas, shoreline zoning, DEP regulations, and so on and so forth. So they're very hard to find that have all of the necessary licensing to do septic inspections and everything else. And then one more quick question. Has the town of Shabig and or this present code officer paid any visits to neighboring Hope Island?
We have.
Thank you.
And the current code enforcement officer and the current tax assessors and myself went out there, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on, if everybody's good with code enforcement, we'll move on to Department 2500, Harbor Master himself.
Harbor Master and Shellfish, so 2025 is 31,951. 2026 proposed is 33,066. So there are two increases that you see. One is in technology and one is in marine supplies. The technology, it had been recommended the last couple of years by the harbor master to change the mooring software. The clerks are in the process of researching what that change would look like, and so we do anticipate that there's going to be some change in the cost. We are looking to have it be and continue to be an online process that prevents from paper documents coming through the town and eliminating as much paper as possible. The equipment maintenance line is just looking at the average over the last couple of years. There's been some increase, and that is more or less relative to the maintenance to the balls that are set up in the Casco Bay area. As far as the department itself, I do anticipate that there is going to be a decrease in the salary line. I do need to have a discussion with the current code enforcement officer. Back in late summer, there was a change in the position as a whole. And so as things currently stand, the current code enforcement officer hours, Harbor Master, is averaging 5 hours a week, and then in the summer months it jumps up, and that is due to personnel changes and taking on other positions. And so I need to have a discussion about what the long-term position for this particular the current employer looks like and whether it is sustainable through fiscal year '26. For now, I hesitate removing that line item in the case that we do potentially maybe have to look for a new harbor master in the near future, in which case I don't know that those hours would be as low as they currently are. Simply because the previous fiscal year, there was a big discussion about decrease in the harbor master position. Coastal Waters was included in the discussion, and there was a lot of discussion around decrease in it, and there was a heavy support in not decrease in it. And so I don't wanna make assumptions based on the current situation and cut it all out in the case that that might change and then we need to increase it. So for now, I'm gonna recommend to keep it as it is, and then hopefully in the coming weeks, I will have a better idea of maybe what the future holds come summertime.
So any questions from the board on the harbor master shellfish? Oh. Fine.
Obviously, the town administrator is gonna have to have a conversation with the current individual who is housing this part-time position to see what the interest is in continuing on or not with these job duties. If something changes with the current situation of having an individual covering some of these duties, you may want to consider thinking outside the box a little bit. And specifically, what I mean by that is stone wharf is a management problem in itself in the summertime. And I have witnessed the current employee and the sheriff's department doing a pretty decent job with Chandler's Cove, wharf and float, and stone wharf and floats, managing people moving through and tying up. And that's been the major activity, in my opinion, of this position. It really hasn't been out on the water, because we haven't had a boat in, what, 7 years or something. So all that I'm saying is if something changes, maybe you can combine a position with parking and management of the wharf along with, or maybe you just keep them separate, but just keep an open mind. And I wouldn't do away with having some presence up at the stone wharf in the summertime. Because if you take away the presence of someone with some apparent authority, you're going to ask for some problems. Thank you.
And then, if we have, I can't quite remember, I should know, but having a harbor master gives us the potential to, there's a reason to have a harbor master in terms of the regulatory programs, and I'm trying to remember what it is.
If you charge for mooring,
That's what it is.
Have to have a harbor master.
Yeah.
And I looked at this last time this discussion came up, I'm almost certain that because we're also a coastal community, we fall under different requirements. So I think we might have to have one
Right,
to some extent regardless.
So, at any rate, I think, and it also plays into agricultural lease reviews. I think having a harbor master gives us sort of a different kind of pathway for the agricultural lease review process. But at any rate, any more questions on that? So I'd say we're to be, to be continued. Any questions, any more questions on harbor master? Okay, so we'll move on to Department 2600, Animal Control.
No change from one year to the next recommended.
Okay. Any questions from the board on animal control? Public? Moving on. Park, this is a big one. Department 3100, so public services, public works.
So Public Works 2025 budget is 195,280. Anticipated 2026 is 217,422, 11.34% increase. So the Public Works, there are currently, as it stands, one full-time employee and one permanent part-time employee. And then we have our solid waste attendant, Jeff Westcott, has been helping out on a part-time basis through the transition process and overseeing those employees, and that has been very helpful because it has allowed somebody to focus on the oversight of that department and solid waste, and really made things a lot smoother. And then we have another employee that steps in on a part-time basis that has been with the town for many years, more or less, when floats are coming in and out of the water, or when there needs to be an extra person to plow. The goal and what is recommended for this budget is to have 2 full-time employees, because I am hopeful that we can have a part-time employee become a full-time employee between now and the end of fiscal year 26. That might change in the coming months, in which case that line item would decrease in salary, but right now, I'm hoping that we can get to the 2 full-time employees and then be able to not have so much part-time help assistance, to be able to have that oversight. And so you will see that the full-time employee salary has jumped up 12%. New employees, you are paying them a lot more than the employees that you've had who've been with you for over the years. And so the major change you see there is that we have the entire Public Works Department is all new employees, so there is a big change there. With the part-time wages, there is a large increase in there because what is currently suggested in the budget, and it might once again change in the future before the end of the budget, is to have during the months. Right now, the way that we're operating is during the months that the transfer station hours are lower is when the solid waste attendant is able to offset those hours and be able to give them to Public Works. And there is a lot of oversight. Over the years, there's been a lot of discussion in hiring Public Works director, more or less. And so while it's not the official title, a lot of the duties are similar to that particular job description. And so that's kind of where the salary for part-time wages, there's a fraction of that in it. The part-time employee who has been with us for many, many years was at a salary of about $17, $18. And so when new employees were hired and the individual was more than willing to stick around, and that person had valuable knowledge about which rows were driven and how plowing was divided, there was some, negotiation, and it was only fair to do to bump the individual up to a little bit more. So that's really relatively close to why those line items are increased. Overtime is decreasing because you see it in previous years. There's been overtime that was really primarily due to one employee being off island, one employee being on island, and so overtime went to the one employee that is on island. Every town Public Works employee that we now have lives on the island, so I don't anticipate that there's going to be much of a I think there's gonna be a better distribution of hours worked, and so I don't anticipate that there's gonna be a lot of overtime needed, but there is some allocated there in the chance that we might have a winter and they have to work overtime. Travel is a decrease. Some is being allocated in there because the training line item is being bumped up significantly because I anticipate and we are planning to have the current employees do some more training than what has been done in the past. We have one employee that's actually going to be doing a supervisory course through Cumberland County that is provided through SMCC. It's free to the municipality, and so, but he will be traveling every Wednesday for 6 to 8 weeks to take that course. So travel and training is allocated for those kind of reasons because we want them to learn as much as we can, and we want to make sure that they're educated and they know what they're doing and they have the resources to be able to do their job to the best of their abilities. Contracted services, you will see a big jump in that. There are funds that are being recommended to put in that, and that number is based off of what the current year's suggested costs were for the removal and placement of the floats. So the town has worked with a contractor to get floats out of the water and to put in. And so what I did is I allocated on the higher end of the quotes that we received to put the money in that, in the public works budget in the anticipation that that is something that the board would want to do in the future. But that is a decision for you to decide and recommend. And I think that should cover all of the different changes. There's going to be a lot of things in here that have stayed the same, whether it's road materials, winter road materials, and so forth. I really see that the current year is, and especially the next year when we experience a full year with the whole new staff, I suspect that fiscal year 27, there's going to be a lot of changes within the budget. There's probably going to be some decrease in some of the line items because the current department and the current employees are really going and thoroughly cleaning through and going through everything and keeping a good record of what the changes need to be. And so it's still hard to tell within this current budget to make some of those recommendations, but I think next year there'll be a better idea, and I would suspect that some of the line items might decrease more.
So, board question on public services, Eliza?
First off, the town garage looks so great. It's such a wonderful improvement. I remember talking about needing a certain type of license to drive a certain type of truck for plowing, and that getting that license was very expensive. Is that amount of training included in this?
So the current vehicles that the town has, with the exception of one, that the one is the one that gets used to take floats in and out. That's the only purpose that vehicle has been used for historically over the years, over the last couple of years.
Is that the crane? The one with the crane?
The big, yes, the big, yeah, that requires the special license. The other vehicles, due to their size, do not require the special licenses. And so the goal is long-term, yes, to have at least one of those guys licensed. Right now, our part-time employee who has been with us has that license, and he has agreed to continue to work for the town on a part-time basis and be needed when that vehicle is needed to be operated with that license. What I would recommend and like to see the employees do is really focus on other trainings in terms of learning how to maintain municipal roads and do some of the other basic municipal upkeep. And then look at if that license is needed in the future, invest into that. But there are other trainings that I think would be more valuable in the moment with the infrastructure and the equipment that we have that we'd like to focus on.
Other questions from the board on public services? I just have one question. Previously we had 2 full-time employees. Right now we have 1 full-time, 2 part-time, 1 occasional part-time.
So the,
So,
yes.
and so would you also see, so the transfer station, person coming back and forth, that's something you would like to continue going forward?
So right now we have 1 full-time employee and we have 1 part-time employee at 20 hours.
That are doing public services.
Yes.
And then we have another part-time employee.
And then we have the solid waste attendant who is stepping in and more or less overseeing those 2 employees, and that's helping offset with one of them being only at 20 hours. And then we have the one that has been with us for several years that is very minimal, only is, he is a driver during storms.
So in your model going forward, we have 2 full-time employees and have the transfer station attendant.
Oversight. That right now with how things are working out, I think that would be the most ideal situation, to have the oversight over that department. I mean, one of the things that we are working on right now, and I give a lot of credit to Jeff for being able to have the ability and the time to run with it, is we had several weeks ago, we had risk management and workers' comp audit come out. There are a lot of things that need improvement, but it was very visible from them that improvements were being made, and so they had some suggestions. One of the things that the town is supposed to be doing is have weekly and monthly reports, checks of walking through the building, making sure it's safe. To my knowledge, we hadn't done that before, and so Jeff is implementing those behaviors with those employees, and they're learning kind of the proper process of safety precaution and the check marks that have to go off. So when they go in, there is a whiteboard with a list of things they need to focus on, things they need to accomplish, and then they let him know when those things are done, and he comes and lets me know, and the process is working really smoothly. And so ideally, it would be good if those 2 people had it all handled, but right now it's working really well, and I don't want to pull him out for the benefit of saving a couple $1,000s, because I think it's a valuable asset. I also am hopeful that the part-time employee that we can only get at 20 hours right now, because that's all we could negotiate, we can maybe entice to a full-time position in the next year and a half or so. That's the goal.
Any more questions from the board?
I just have a quick question. So barging's a hot topic of the day. So there's barging under public services that's separate from solid waste.
Yeah.
So what's getting barged out?
So public services, anything that gets barged, so when vehicles are being barged on and off the island for maintenance,
Okay.
when road materials are being barged, when sand, salt, things like that, those are going to be barging relative to public services,
Waste.
transfer station barging, trash recycling, and so forth. So one of the other things that Public Works is looking into now is rather than doing routine maintenance to town vehicles and barging them off the island and having the cost of it, can we find somebody that we pay a cost of, 2 barges to have come to the island and do maintenance? So those are the little adjustments that I anticipate will be for the benefit of the department, but they're gonna take some time to implement, and until they're implemented, I have hesitation in making assumptions and changing the budget too drastically, other than increasing it significantly.
So, if the board's good?
Yeah.
How about the public on public services? I can't imagine Mark has a question. Mike?
I'd like to start out by saying I've met both of the new employees. I know Tanner a little better than I do the other, is it Michael? Yeah. They're both very, very pleasant. Tanner, I agree with the goal that Vic had described of trying to get this department back to a full-time functioning department with dedicated employees. I also believe that some of the mechanical talents that is possessed by Tanner may end up being a real value back to our community for maintenance of equipment. From what I've seen him already do, he gave me a tour of the garage day before yesterday, showed me a bunch of stuff that he's already fixed that reminds me of David Campbell and my brother Wayne. Those type of talents are hard to find, so I would continue to groom that type of initiative from an employee. I have a couple of questions specifically, if I may. Item 3335, travel, you still have $2,000 in there, and I'm just wondering why you would have that much in there if all employees are, at least at this point, island-based.
I did recommend pulling some out. I wanted to almost cut it in half, but then I was, thinking in terms of the training that, I hope these employees could receive, and separately, the travel that could take place revolved around that. And so not knowing what that could look like, I had reservation of pulling out any more, because I felt more comfortable keeping it in there and then having it go into undesignated than risking potentially, the whole budget going away.
Just a question. Item 3120 above that marine supplies, but you still have $3,000. I'm assuming that's going to apply directly to the contracted services individual working on the floats?
No, so that particular budget line item has always been there, and so that number, as you could see over the last couple of years, has been minimal, because it is materials that Public Works would purchase for the benefit of doing upkeep to
Ramps.
the floats, ramps, things like that. The contracted service, 5,000, is where the cost went in for hiring somebody in removing the floats and putting the floats in. The marine services is more or less really one of those line items that I did not touch.
Yeah.
Because of the transition. I think there'll be a lot of change in that, but then again, we just had, 2 of the guys spent several hours trying to glue 2 parts together to try to keep 2 floats that we're gonna completely replace in a couple of months.
Gotcha. Item 4600, cold patch, I think $2,500 is what you have in there.
Yeah.
Recommended. Maybe enough, you may want to consider 3,000, where it's about $3,000 a load now. To bring it over. Culverts and drainage, you've got $1,000. I think you all set with culverts, but there is one or two at least still left to replace, so you may want to just evaluate that. My last comment is 4630 is road material, and my specific comment with that is where you're developing a new crew and they don't have to worry about floats and ramps quite as much with the new contracted system coming in. Maybe have them purchase some more road materials and focus on doing some work on the dirt road. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, and Chip, did you also have a question on the public services? Okay, and so I think, and I heard Mark say bump it up, so I don't remember.
You may want to record that.
Oh, it's recorded, it's permanent.
All right, so we're kind of, and I think our goal should be to be done by maybe 8 o'clock, yeah, kind of being.
Yeah, stop.
Let's do it.
So let's shoot for 8 o'clock, we're kind of coming down, we'll get through the big ones.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Solid waste is another big one, and then it's not bad. So Department 3200, solid waste.
So solid waste, fiscal year 25 is 241,802, fiscal year 26 is 246,790. The large increase here is really in building maintenance and the chipping and the grinding of the brush with the decrease in landfill monitoring. Really what I did is more or less what was in the landfill monitoring, I put it into the building maintenance. There has been talk in the last couple of months, and we had received some estimates, verbal estimates. There needs to be some electrical work that's done, really, and so we would like to allocate the funds into the next fiscal year to be able to do that. With the chipping and the grinding of the brush, that's a very hot topic. The chipping that was done this year, it had historically been done for the same amount. When I agreed to have the same company come out, they did it. It was agreed upon for the same amount. When I received the bill was $23,000 more than I anticipated. Obviously, we don't have that in the budget.
How much?
$23,000.
Good grief.
So I'm figuring that out. However, all of this led to me having discussions with Lionel Plant, because every other town barges their material off island. And so yes.
Yeah.
They don't even chip it. They barge off the brush and they brush off the logs. And so I have gotten some rough estimates about what those costs would be. Obviously, there would be an increase to barging on the municipal level. And so the goal is to really not have it be much more than what it's costing now, which I think is doable and possible. The reason for the increase there is because we do anticipate if the town, if the board were to agree to move in that direction, there would be some increase. The increase would just be in the barging. And so it's in the chipping and brush now to really recognize that there is going to be some change to some extent to that particular area. Decisions have to be made. It might be reallocated to the barging line, but that's definitely a department where there's still some shifting that is anticipated. The goal is for me to bring a proposal to you on a recommendation where we're able to remove that material on a more regular basis and not wait a year for it to be accumulated and then get rid of it that way. Until there is a better plan at least to contain it.
So any questions from the select board on solid waste? And I would point out that this is by far our most expensive part.
Yeah.
And we do capture some costs, some revenue on fees, but it's something, it's sort of a perennial problem, and so, you know, we may be looking at that again.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, David?
Yeah, I probably missed it, but what's the reason for the increase in building maintenance?
Electrical, upgrade.
Okay,
Electrical work needs to be done to the building.
thank you.
Jane?
With the transfers, solid waste committee will be ready to meet at some point, and the survey results will be taken into consideration, so that might have an impact.
And I also should mention that the ETIP group has been looking at a biomass system.
Oh,
So the potential, they're asking the, you know, NREL, the National Lab, to look at the feasibility of that. Because that could be, we could potentially generate electricity, but, you know, we'll, I think we all just need to stay in communication about that.
So we'll be having other islands bring the biomass stuff here.
Could be, but the other part of the biomass, as we just submitted a wildfire grant, is that's a fire hazard.
That is.
So I think our goal should be to get rid of that fire.
Have you had enough? Had enough?
Had enough.
One quick question when allowable. Did you say you got an invoice for $46,000? Did I hear you correctly?
43 and change, but
$43,000 with no explanation before the bill was sent to you?
I'm working on an explanation.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
Have a good day, thank you.
Any questions from the public about solid waste? Moving
I
on.
love you guys being here.
Let's do what we can here, so,
Stop.
400.
So this is our annual payment to Yarmouth towards the Cousins Island Reserve. It is a set amount based on a legal agreement between the two towns, and so every year I know exactly the number to put in.
Any questions on that from anybody? Okay, 4,600 contributions.
No change to date. There will be a particular meeting relative to the nonprofits. We are sending them an email, asking them for the information. The goal is for you to have the information about 3-4 weeks in advance of the meeting, so that if there are any follow-up questions, we can provide them to them and have an explanation in time for the meeting.
Oh,
But we won't go into detail about that now, unless there's any current questions. Okay, 5810, general assistance.
No change, it's something that we are required to have, and there is a contribution that goes to the council that helps out with general assistance
And
needs.
sort of for confidentiality benefits, the council kind of administers, or, you know, has programs that function as general assistance.
Yes, the town is required, and I've gone through one application in my time. I never wish to do another one, so I think it's great that the town contributes to the council to be able to assist people in need.
And Department 5910, health services.
Once again, we're state legally required to have a health officer. It is a quarterly stipend.
Any questions? I'm gonna keep this cruising through. If you have a question, let me know. 6,200 cemetery. And we have a slight increase.
Yep, so there is a slight increase, and the only increase is really similar to other departments. Although it looks like it's 9.64% increase in the salary, it's really just looking at what Annie has worked, bumping up her rate a little bit and making it a fair wage.
Is it comparable with the other wage increases in the town?
I would say for the positions.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on cemeteries?
No.
Department 6900, debt service.
So debt service has gone down a little bit, and the only reason for that is you will see in line 6511 for the school interest, it is down, and that's because same thing with the broadband. It's with the way the bond bank works, every so many years you get basically a credit and then they subtract it for you. And so that's the only reason why it's down, but this is the obligated debt that we're required to pay based on all of the debts that we've accrued over the last couple of years. There are two of them where fiscal year 27 is going to be the last year that we are paying them. So there's going to be a nice chunk of cash to reallocate to another debt like snow pier or barging or coastal erosion.
Don't plan on anything hard. All right,
Quick question on the broadband. I think in this year's budget, there's no revenue associated for what Axiom is gonna pay back, right?
That is correct.
So there will be a revenue line in the new budget, I would assume.
So yes, so there's gonna be, once I have the information more figured out about the two previous fiscal years, we have paid, we are owed that money as well, so we need to figure out with Axiom how that is gonna be caught up in addition to this debt as well. And then once I have a better idea of that, I will put that in the revenue area to offset those costs.
Are they paying anything now?
Not at the moment. The payment are supposed to start when they start collecting money, and I'm working on it.
Okay, because they are collecting money.
Yeah,
They're collecting money.
they're going
Yeah.
to money.
Okay.
Okay, and will that be retroactive?
You will see that in the revenue.
Thank you.
So debt will be one thing, revenue will be another, still two different areas for
And do
voting.
you have a sense that, by the end of this fiscal year, you'll kind of figure out where we're at on that?
I would suspect within the next, I think if not in the next month and a half, then I'd be concerned.
All right. Any other questions on debt service?
Yeah.
Department 7500, which is often a big, big concern, benefits and insurance. So you've got a flat.
So, yep, I do have a flat one in here. The only anticipated line that I need, there are a couple of line items in here I need to change. There's been some change with Paid and Medical Leave Act and things like that, and so we figured out the salaries. We, thank you to my wonderful bookkeeper, has created new Excel spreadsheets. We have to rework the Excel document from how we've been doing it. Once that is done, these numbers will shift a little bit. I don't anticipate super drastic changes in them.
So health and life insurance, though, you're not expecting a big increase in health insurance?
So with the health insurance, I don't expect a dramatic increase. There will be a slight increase due to just the natural increase of the health insurance, but even with the shift of all of the employees, the positions were all positions that were covered under benefits, with the exception of the code enforcement officer one, so there will be a shift, but it shouldn't be dramatic.
Any questions from the board on 7500?
No? Explains itself.
No. Public? Okay, moving along. School debt, we won't do the school because
So,
we're not.
yeah, so what you're
The school budget,
doing-
just so everybody knows, the school budget's just in there as last year's budget.
Correct, yeah. So what you're doing is from page 21, you are then skipping straight to page 32,
30,
This is all.
30.
When are we done paying to come?
30 is streetlights.
Well, with the street lights, I didn't put in any changes. There were some new LED lights that were put in. Well, 2024 cost was higher. I'm going to remain hopeful that that is going to offset, that the new LED lights are going to offset those costs. But if the board feels like I should bump it up, I'm happy to do so.
Any questions about the streetlights? Okay. The contingency allows being 8,300. Okay, that's the next one.
Last year, the select board bumped it up, and I did not touch it this year, and,
And our philosophy there was that the budget had increased, as we said, almost double, but the contingency had been carried forward at like 10,000, I think. So we really felt, given the larger budget, we needed a bigger contingency. Okay, any questions about that?
No, promise.
Next page, 8,800 tax paid to Cumberland was really, we don't have any say on this, so.
yeah, so
Does everybody understand what
we pay, so this is, we pay 50% of the, of what we collect for outer island, taxes. So,
It was part of the secession agreement.
how long?
yeah.
For 50 years.
Forever?
50 years, that's
Yeah,
right.
so the, and this number, I have not done the math for this one yet. It will probably change a little bit just because Hope Island drastically increased, and so they're paying well over $100,000, so unfortunately half of that all goes to Cumberland.
Apartment 8,900, county tax.
County tax is a number that we receive from Cumberland County. We have not received that number from them to date.
So it usually goes up a small percentage. Well, it's gone back and forth recently, but normally we would expect it to go up some.
Yeah, so the Cumberland County went through fiscal year change, and so as a result you could see in 2020, from 23 to 24, there was a significant jump because what the Shabig agreed is rather than paying a 6 month of Cumberland County in one sum, it's split over 6 years. And so for 6 years, 5 or 6 years, you'll see this jump, and then you'll see kind of it go down a little bit to what an annual cost is. But that will be included once I have that number from them.
Any questions on that? Nope. Okay, Department 9,000 capital improvements, we're really gonna tackle that separately.
Yep, so what I just did for now is I based on kind of the trajectory of the year and what some of the anticipated discussions could be for capital improvement. I threw in numbers in there just to really help with the overall budget number, but that would be a discussion where the board, with the input of, finance committee, could decide on which numbers you really want in there.
So last year we put in 552,000, right? Is that right?
Yes,
And then this year, and this is an arbitrary number, but almost
Yes.
700,000. But that's usually the number we really care about in the end.
yes.
Right? It makes the most difference in the budget.
And like I said, I was gonna really beef it up, and so that's knowing that other areas still have some increases, decreases.
So overall, we're looking at, right now, and I don't think this number means anything, we're looking at a 4,141,680 from 2025, this fiscal year. The next fiscal year budget is a 5% increase overall of 315,600. And so I think that number means nothing at the moment.
Correct, I would agree, I would not,
Adjustments.
yeah.
David?
And I just want to make a point that the storm damage is in here, and that's still a
big.
Real big.
So
Big
the
item
storm
and
damage, repair and restoration up until last year was Indian Island Reserve retaining wall.
Right.
Wall.
That was it.
So the taxpayers chose to change the name and the description and more money was put into it. And I think it would be wise for the foreseeable future to keep adding money to.
Jane?
I had a question from a member of the community about the solar array purchase, that it was time for that solar array to be purchased. Now would be a good time. Do you know about that? Is that accurate?
No, I know nothing about it.
So last year it came up and it was proposed that we purchase it. And we actually did not have enough money in the solar array account to acquire it.
Okay.
So then we kicked it to the climate action team, who kind of evaluated sort of the cost effective, the cost benefit of purchasing it.
Yeah.
And they had some questions, and they wrote a memo, which we should share with the board again. And sort of, there's some pros and cons to purchasing it. It's not required that, just so you know, it's not required that we purchase it, it's an option. And one of the things they did recommend is, following the discussion with the board, that the finance committee really look into that and try to make a decision, because it relates to projections of energy prices. But if we buy it, we own it, we need to repair it, we need to maintain it, and so there are different schools of thought about the benefits. So I don't want to get into it tonight, but I think the climate action team did a pretty good job of evaluating the fiscal benefits versus some of the challenges. Steve Hinchman had provided all of the financial information. And of course, this is a bit of a changing landscape with, rent credits and the whole solar scene. It's very complex. And so it's not for the faint of heart to start trying to evaluate those numbers. So bottom line is, I think this would be a good year to kind of figure out. Last year we couldn't purchase it anyway, we didn't have enough money. I think the general recommendation was there's no urgency in purchasing it. And so I think we can take some time.
And is that the responsibility, who is that the responsibility of? The climate action
Ultimately,
team?
because we weren't gonna buy it, they kind of took the time to look into it and they were interested in that. I think it's really ultimately the select board's decision, and what the climate action team recommended is, it's mostly a financial decision, not an environmental decision. And they recommended that the finance committee consider.
Who owns it?
Revision Energy owns it. It
Oh.
was part of it was installed 10 years ago, maybe?
Ooh, less than that.
Maybe, yeah.
Seven, I think.
And so it generates enough electricity to basically cover our municipal.
Yes,
and
municipal
costs.
buildings,
Right, and one
not the streetlights,
Right.
which is the biggest cost
Oh, it is.
to the municipal electricity.
And it was sort of a program that existed at that
That would-
time. One thing Steve has mentioned, and I'm not into this field, but if you say our electricity, our building electricity needs expand significantly, it changes the benefits, like the rate, the rate credit that we get, so that it's complicated.
It's been very complicated to take because we still receive the bills from CMP, we receive bills from Revision, and there is a lot of overlapping, and I don't know enough about what the benefits of them are, but as far as the cost to saving of the electricity, I personally have not seen a significant decrease in what the municipality pays for electricity, regardless of who they're paying it to. The cost is a cost regardless.
And I would also add that there is, so ETIP is, I can't remember the acronym, but the climate action team we're participating in this Department of Energy program to really look at our town's energy needs. And a couple of the other islands have done that. Eastport is looking at building a microgrid, Islesboro is looking at building a microgrid. So I think also in terms of the energy-related decisions, kind of working with that group, sort of, you know, you don't want to get out ahead of what that group might be doing, because the Department of Energy is also providing money. Like they gave Eastport a very substantial amount of money to install this microgrid. So we're hoping that that might lead to some kind of energy structures out here that might change how we think about this. And every, you know, there's a lot going on kind of on different fronts. So I don't know, Vika, is there any need to go over the revenues at this point?
So there's really nothing in the revenue. Most of it I have not touched. There is one mistake that I do see in here. As we get closer into the more in-depth into the budget and the numbers that we receive about revenue from this year will have a better impact on kind of what the 3-year average is. And then there are some numbers that we just get that we plug in. Once we get closer, closer and more deeper into the budget, then those numbers will be a little bit more relative to the discussion. One thing worth mentioning though is relative to the solar array purchase, we do have a reserve account where there's a little bit over $90,000 in the chance that the town chooses to buy out that money based on what we were told is there to cover it. If the town chooses not to, then that money could be upon approval of taxpayers at the town meeting, could be reallocated to other uses.
Thank you.
So I think that's a wrap, I think. We're just about at 8 o'clock. And we have a regular, we sort of crept up on me and feel like I could email. We have a regular select board meeting next Wednesday.
Yeah.
With a regular agenda, and then the next budget meeting.
The following budget meeting is going to be on January 22nd, where a more in-depth discussion will take place about capital.
Okay, so capital in particular, that's an important one, because it's kind of where the big chunk changes. And it's where the board really has some decision making to do. And with, hopefully this year with some finance committee input. And I think, never mind what it's been, it looks even more daunting kind of looking forward. So thinking about future capital costs, not even what.
Finance committee does have a couple meetings lined up in the next couple of weeks, where I think there will be a better idea of how the board will operate and what the focuses will be. So I think, while I don't anticipate every answer could be provided, there should be a better understanding of the operation of the finance committee by the time this capital discussion comes into play. If you don't have the budget dates in your calendar, I would highly recommend putting them in, because there are some Saturday meetings coming up. And we are staggered some weeks where we're back to back, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, so.
And Elijah, you have, what are you out of action need-wise?
So I'm gonna propose that Vika and I get reclining chairs so that we can sit in these meetings with our legs up. So I know that this chair's not gonna work, but I will be here.
All right.
I will tell you.
One thing we did discuss, we don't need to decide tonight, is could potentially alternate some remote, some virtual meetings. Particularly given people's individual circumstances and some in person. For the budget, I don't think we want to do that for this regular select board meeting, so I think we can see how that works with people's
But
schedules.
we're gonna need better seating for 2 hours.
Richard, you're gonna have to get a joint replacement and be part of the crowd.
We're getting this joint replaced. All right, so I think we can think about that, but I think it might also just this time of year, people don't even have to leave the house. Particularly given you two guys, so we can
Yeah,
look at
that's
that,
a
but
good.
We're gonna do
I
it
think you and Eliza Jane work on the calendar. If you want to suggest some virtual meetings that works with your various medical schedules will take it.
No, Vika's not impacted at all. She's gonna be tap dancing in 2 weeks.
All right,
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, we're good.
good?
We're good.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Move to
We
adjourn.
learned
Oh,
still.
we're in a workshop, there is none of that.
I